what's the craziest internet-related production challenge that you guys have all faced? Maybe start with you, Terry.
The first one that comes to mind, probably a lot of similar stories for everybody, is during COVID. A lot of interesting projects were thrown at us a couple months after everyone kind of locked down and sheltered in place. I was actually with David on one of these, and it was for, I guess we won't get into details who it was for, but we had to go to the talent's house, and it was a streaming, it was on a streaming platform, so it seemed like a big deal, but the way we handled it was just me and Dave on production. And we had to go into the apartment, and at the same time we had to build a camera, and then we had to build another camera that was PTZ, so the director, the producer could move it around and see what the set looked like. But the set was really just the talent's living room, and it was just a wall, basically. There was not a lot of room. So we set this camera up, set the actual camera we were shooting with, and Dave had to coordinate the PTZ and the feed from the camera so the client can see. Meanwhile, it's COVID, so we have masks and gloves, and we're trying to build this. We set the cameras up and we leave. We come back the next day. They set designed the set, so they removed all of the furniture from the house, but stacked it like Legos everywhere when we came back. And so what was really already a small amount of room was even smaller. And then they had me, so I was the camera operator, gaffer, AC, I don't know, anything with cameras and lights. So I'm in a mask with rubber gloves on, trying to like duct tape like fairy lights up in the background. And they're like, you have to they're telling Dave, like, we can see that he doesn't have his gloves on. He has to have his gloves on. And so I'm like trying to tape, and the gaff tape is ripping the gloves off, the tips off every time. I'm like sweating. There's nowhere for us to be when they're actually shooting. So we like go to their little back like deck. There's nothing open, nowhere to eat or drink, and we're not allowed to use the bathroom. And there was nowhere to go to the bathroom.
Wow.
And so like David with his brilliant British,
bedside manner,
he like sweet talked a wine shop down the street eventually. And so we got like a post shoot beverage, I'm pretty sure, and then we used the bathroom, and we were just like, what the hell happened?
Wow.
It was crazy. Yeah.
What about you, Nick? What was going on in your world during the pandemic? Were you already kind of prepared, or do you feel like that you got thrown right into the deep end and had to figure out a bunch of new stuff?
I think we were all thrown into the deep end.
Yeah.
You know, I don't think a lot of infrastructure was set for how much things needed to become remote at that time. Because I feel like even at that time, things like Zoom weren't necessarily even as powerful as they are now. Where it really was just like a once in a blue moon conference call situation, and everyone's trying to figure out how to turn their mic on and all that stuff. But I think once the pandemic hit, that was really hard, because the main job that I do and the main show that I produce, we would travel to every studio that we would go to and I would set up my entire rig at their studio. I'd set up lighting, camera work, and then all my switching stuff in their studio, and then I would run the show kind of right behind them as they're mixing a song from scratch. That's the point of the show, is we go to a producer, they mix a band song from scratch, teach people how to mix that song in real time, live. So the trick for me was, once the pandemic happened, obviously we're not flying anymore to go to these studios. So it was a situation where I had to figure out how to get all of those sources, whether it's the screen, the DAW audio, microphones from everyone, pictures from everyone, camera, video from everyone, all of that remotely. That was a probably 3 or 4 month hurdle. And, I'm proud to say that I'm pretty savvy when it comes to trying to figure out things, and I like solving puzzles like that, but I definitely don't have the education that a lot of people might have in the same industry that I'm in, to where they were trained for this kind of stuff. I feel like I'm a little bit more, I don't know what the word is, maybe grassroots, but I'm kind of just
scrappy.
Just trying to get it done in an efficient way and as powerful as possible, and in a way that helps the client, or in this case for the show, the producer who's mixing the song, make it as easy for them as possible. Because, on top of having to mix a song from scratch in 8 hours, I also then have to ask them a million and one things about tech support and video work and all that stuff that they have no idea about in most cases. So the biggest struggle for me is definitely trying to figure that part out. And I still struggle with it monthly at this point, just because every single computer or every single producer has a different background with video work and all that stuff.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, we kind of hear it a lot from Source Elements, just how much tech burden everyone kind of inherited right around the time of the pandemic. Just the amount of people that were like, very accomplished audio professionals, voice actors, all of a sudden now needing to understand network engineering. Yeah. And be like, and now you're going to be the recordist as well as the performer and all these other things. But
they're like, what does packet loss mean? Well,
exactly. What about you, Ezra? What's the craziest internet related challenge that you can think of that you've been through?
Well, I'm glad we pivoted away from COVID, because I have this great response to all your questions. So, basically, there was this big initiative while I worked at IMAX called IMAX Live, right? So we stood up a tech stack in our theater network, and the ongoing slogan was there's more IMAX theaters than there are Starbucks across the globe.
Wow.
And really, it's in more countries than there are in Starbucks. So anyway, we were doing this QC process where we had Kanye playing at the Coliseum in Los Angeles. So he had this big concert. There was not a lot of time for rehearsal, typical Kanye style. I'm not afraid to say that. We were waiting for this rehearsal moment to be able to do our proper QC. So I'm standing in the theater, the live stream starts. I'm trying to do QC with the executive director, trying to figure out bass management. And I'm getting calls from other theaters saying there's differences in tolerance. So it was just kind of a wake-up call that even with very established corporation, there's variances across a network like that. And that was somewhat tricky, but it actually allowed us to tighten things up. So after that, we actually went with TV meters to every theater, and we're able to kind of get a baseline across. But there were some things that were taken for granted going into that production. And then, of course, working with celebrities who don't, appreciate pre-production and rehearsals was challenging in a live stream environment. So.
Fair enough. How about you, Dave? Craziest internet challenge?
I'm going to stay away from the pandemic as well, because that's where I pretty much had all of my crazy experiences, including the one that Terry was which was quite some sort, I'm sure, for just pure, just putting ourselves in the middle of something both dangerous, hazardous, and grueling. We've done a bunch of broadcast specific projects over the years, and one of the things that my team and I are always very keen to do is the blending of all the different areas of expertise. So, bringing together what we know from our broadcast background, what we know from our streaming background, where we can kind of pull together all of these understandings in essentially how to get content out to the user. And I met a lot of the guys here on this call through our work in 360 and VR, immersive content, so on. And through this process of understanding how that works, we kind of then understood how to kind of blend the world, so to speak. So putting 360 in a space where we can start doing multicam and making that live, and that kind of started to grow into something new. And there's a couple of projects I remember that I'm going to just elaborate very quickly on. One of which was actually with Ross when we did the Country Music Festival and built an enormous fly pack underneath a stage where we basically established the first attempt at a spatialized audio experience in 360 live. And we were using the Aura cameras, which I think had just come out at NAB, and it was a question of they were very cagey about letting us use them, and they're very cagey about letting us play around with them, and we ended up having to buy a couple to try and see if we could kind of get more support from them. But by and large, it was about essentially putting together a very elaborate broadcast-ready experience in a very high-value brand. It was a very successful experience. We made some great content. We went live with it, and it was great. Up until the point where the show ended, and in most cases, there is a fast strike in any situation. But we were literally under the bleachers in an environment which was purpose-built specifically for this setup. And apart from the bleachers, there was this big rotating stage. And again, the stage was rotating around us, on top of us, and everything else. And I remember that I had literally just started unplugging things when literally chunks of steel were coming out of things, and chunks of aluminium and chunks of like girders were like literally falling down around me as if the whole place was about to collapse. And it was just the fact that they didn't know that we were there and had decided to literally strike the stage with us underneath it. So that was one, and I remember, Ross, you were. I mean, it was quite an experience. But and then the other one that comes to mind is one that really it set the bar with another mutual friend of ours that I think has, and a number of other folk actually who work in this realm. When we did the Special Olympics in Abu Dhabi. And again, this was with a camera system that is no longer with us. The Samsung, what was it? The 360i? Was that the flat? Ezra, help me. What was the one called that looked like a saucer that had supposed to have the stereo lenses and had the whole thing going on? But the story itself that I remember was getting to Abu Dhabi with an entire fly pack to build this thing. Getting there, everyone else had built their systems. So all the broadcast teams were in, all the traditional 2D stuff was in, all of the cameras were in, the spider cam was in, and all of the rigs were in. Everybody was in. Everybody had a nice office. Everyone had a nice studio suite. Everyone had air conditioning. Everyone had windows. Everyone had everything they possibly needed for their part of the show. And we were brought in to bring an extra level of excitement to the sort of user investment in what was happening. So it was 360 with picture-in-picture, over-capture capabilities, all of these bells and whistles, and spatial audio. So all of these things were tied together. So when we arrived, and they showed us to this spot which we were going to accommodate for the entire time we were there, which we were there for 7 days, we were shown to a platform next to an air conditioning rack outside on top of the entire system. So we had to build... we had to put together like an entire machine room of equipment outside at the top of a stadium in the middle of a desert, which was always getting hit with sandstorms. So we had to build tents, we had to wrap equipment, we had to get very elaborate with how we kind of put things around it. It was just one of these experiences which I enjoyed it tremendously, and the team were amazing, and we did it and did the. But the two takeaways were from it was that when we went together to get this done, it was an interesting exercise in understanding your location before you go. Because once we were up and running, we realized very quickly that the platform that we were supposed to be streaming to had been embargoed by the country's security services. So we couldn't actually get out on the broadband connection that we were supposed to use, and then had to pivot to YouTube at the last minute and go to them because they were the only other service provider that had a 360 deliverable platform that we could utilize. So unfortunately, it wasn't quite what the clients wanted, and it was a big gig for a certain brand, and they were, understandably confused by the whole process.
But sounds like a level of excitement.
That was kind of like my
There's no shortage of those types of experiences, like on the bleeding edge content mediums, But I'm curious to ask this question because I think everyone's going to have a slightly different meaning to this question, and it's basically it touches on what you're talking about, Dave. But how do you approach ensuring rock solid internet for critical live events? What's your approach, Terry? You probably are pushing the maximum of what you can do on a consumer device often, right? But
so early on, I kind of paid to play, and I just bought a live view pack. The lower end, I forget the model unit, and it just has 2 modems with unlimited SIMs, and then that's kind of how I started. It's developed since. LiveView introduced a Pro version and their own modems and their own unlimited SIMs in there. So I did upgrade to that, but now I'm using an app. Anytime new things come out that are less power draw, same connectivity, and lighter weight because I'm on a bicycle. I'm very interested. So I'm now just keeping my ear to the street, I guess, and trying to find out, what new thing is coming out. And there's an app called Moblin that I use a lot now. That's all I use. So it just you use a local network, and it actually takes the cell SIM info, and it runs it through the hotspot, basically through the local network, and it disguises it as cell phone data, and then it's SRTLA. So on my server side, it combines it all. It's been working pretty well. It's way lighter. But yeah, sorry, I didn't even answer your question. The answer is just keeping my mind open to new ideas. And it seems like on the software side of things are really changing. It's an iOS app, so I run it from my phone. It has camera switching. It has multiple audio inputs, multiple camera inputs.
That's just as reliable as the bonded live view.
It isn't quite
single SIM and single carrier on the mobile.
It's not, and it's not even a network thing. On the LiveView Pro, I was doing SRT, and this Moblin is SRTLA. So there are some issues, and what they do to fix them is they just change resolution, and that's built into the adaptive resolution is built into the app. So it's hard to say because I'm network stressing like crazy because I live streamed from New York City all the way to Portland, Oregon in 2022, and that I used a live view for that. And my live streams aren't just like checking in for an hour. I'm live streaming for 8 to 10 hours a day. And so I'm just out there
Verizon
stressing.
Or T-Mobile, AT&T?
Well, yeah, I found out which networks work the best. Verizon seems to work a lot better on coastal city areas. In the middle of the country, or once you get up kind of upstate, AT&T and T-Mobile kind of take over a little bit. And then a lot of the Midwest and the rest of the cities, it seemed like it was AT&T kind of had the. So I have one. I basically have a. It's all bonded, so it automatically I'm connected to all three networks, and currently I have with Moblin I have T-Mobile, AT&T, and 2 Verizons, and I just set up a Starlink Mini for this tour I'm doing in Europe to see if I could. When I'm in the mountains, I'm just scared there's no tower, so I'm going to see how that works. It's probably not going to work that well because I'm moving, but I'm going to test it.
Well, who cares about the internet? How do your legs feel?
Oh, it's fine. I ride a bike a lot. It's the best way to travel, man. It's the best way to see a place for sure.
Yeah,
by bicycle.
That's awesome.
You
Nick,
take roads and paths you don't ever see. So
that's very cool.
Nick, I imagine you have a unique POV on this because I feel like often recording studios are bunkers, and sometimes they're out in the middle of remote areas and have poor internet service, and there's also this kind of like, I don't know, there's I feel like a lot of these people don't often want to have outside gear brought in. They're just sort of like, keep it simple. If you bring too much tech debt, it kind of ruins the vibe and stuff like that. So like, how do you approach when you're working with a new artist in a new location recording studio? How do you suss out what you're going to run into? It's just trial and error.
Yeah, it really is trial and error. Sometimes it's nice sometimes we have like a home-based studio where like if the producer, this was back before we switched to basically a fully remote situation, but in times where I was traveling to studios doing the show in person with them, we'd either have them fly to a studio that I already had set up that I knew I was reliable, and they would be willing to come mix in that space, whether it was mixing on headphones or we get them speakers that they're comfortable mixing through or whatever. Mm-hmm. But back then, sometimes it was weird because sometimes it could be like a dude's garage that he turned into a recording studio or mixing studio where we had to set up everything from, and they set it up to where it wasn't, they didn't think about live streaming or internet issues. And they go, well, the modem is about 100 feet away in the living room. So we got to figure out how to get, from here to there, more or less, with either some sort of network rig or situation there to try and at least stay hardwired.
Mm-hmm.
But sometimes, we had a bigger issue at one point where we went to a studio that we had done a bunch of things in I think it's in Studio City in LA. But we, I guess we didn't really think through the day that we streamed because it was Easter weekend. And then the entirety of Burbank's internet went out during a live stream. So we had to basically just record it local. We played advertisements for about 2 hours while we tried to figure it out. Meanwhile, it wasn't even going anywhere because we were just trying to hopefully get the internet back up.
Yeah.
But it wasn't even the studio. It was just Burbank in general was down. So we ended up having to do that one offline and then uploaded it later. But there's always crazy things that get thrown at you. I just did a stream yesterday where the guest was, or the mixer was in Australia. And so he's sending me all of his feeds from Australia to me. The host of the show is in Wisconsin. I'm in Orlando. So I'm trying to get all of their pieces in on my side to where I can still live switch in a low latency scenario while also still getting the best bit rate, the best, settings I possibly can for all those individual assets. It's one thing if we set it up local on their side, you're going to get the best quality possible in most cases. But in order to do those live low latency switching of everything to where I can switch to a full frame of camera versus their screen or whatever, it can take some figuring out how to make all that manage together.
Mm-hmm. How do you handle, like, I think it's pretty interesting because, like, I think in your case and Terry's case are quite different from each other because Terry can plan with redundancy and bring redundancy. But in your case, like, even if you were to try and think of a redundancy system and you drop it in on the talent side, they still need to know how to operate it.
Yeah.
Right. And so that ends up being probably where it falls flat. So you're kind of really at the mercy of really whatever just happens with kind of like the consumer internet that's out there, or the stereotypical.
A lot of times, I've tried making like care packages that we ship out to set up on their side, and I just the flexibility of everyone's know-how of that stuff mixed with like me having to remote support them can just kind of get a little dicey. So ultimately, I don't just show up the day before the stream and we just go. We're already testing things and checking things months before the actual event happens with that person. And there's plenty of time for us to kind of, what equipment do we need to get you out there? All that kind of stuff to where the show actually becomes, as seamless as possible. But I think in most industries, I would imagine there's obviously those technical difficulties that you just have to kind of power through, and I think that's where the quick thinking that I'm quite proud of can come into play.
Nice. Ezra and David, this I'm curious to hear your perspective. You've got a $1,000 budget and you've got a $10,000 budget. What are you doing to get the best quality network for your productions? How do you approach those two dramatically different things?
I could jump in, David, just on a high level.
The sky's the limit on
you've
one
only
side.
got you've only got $10,000, Ezra.
Yeah.
only
Well,
only
I'm
Ezra,
here
Ezra 10K.
in
That's
Oahu,
it.
right, in Honolulu. So residential internet isn't quite as offering isn't quite the same as like Los Angeles, right? So if I want to get something at my home, I can't get symmetrical bandwidth. I can get it gig down. I can only get about 40 up. So what I've done is I've went around and networked with all the local data centers. There's a couple here in Honolulu, and so I can broker these deals with them, whether it's like a 15-day or a 30-day kind of engagement with them, where I can get up to 3 gig symmetrical, and that's really been helpful. But then you're tied to this dark room in a server aisle somewhere. But at least you have that reliable internet. When it comes to remote production, I always have a variety of 5G hotspots in my back pocket, right? Whether it's ICGo, Netgear, what's the other one? Nighthawk, the Netgear Nighthawk is a really powerful one that we found. It goes on a couple different bands, and then we use High Vision for a lot of our encoders, which have been pretty reliable. But you got to pay for it. But I think pre-production is key. I agree with what Nick was saying. Like the earlier you can get involved, the better with these shows to kind of iron out the kinks and do any massaging. But just having things in your back pocket is always a good call.
In premium paid content, where does the audience really notice the investment in quality? I know this is how long is a string type thing. It's probably different for every medium, but I'm curious. Maybe start with you, Terry. Where do you feel?
Honestly, I think if the audio on my side of things, as long as the audio, if you've upgraded your audio, if you're using a lav, I mean, I know it's super basic for what you guys are doing, but that's the hugest change for, streaming to viewers from YouTube and Twitch. Like if you, even if you don't have good video quality, if your audio is getting through, like you'll continue to still communicate, speak directly to people watching, and you can still kind of describe what's going on, and you can apologize and say, hey, it'll be right. The connection will get better in a sec. Looking for towers.
Do you have any have you built any kind of like custom mic setup? And I imagine you've gone through so much trial and error to find something that works well for you.
I'd be curious what lav you're using.
Yeah,
it's changed. I used to have a I used to, before lives, I was using Electrosonic, but honestly, I just use the DJI Mic 2 now because I stream from the bike and it connects directly to a Pocket or an Osmo Action 4, and it's all wireless, and so like it's great. I just bought a couple of those.
Those are fantastic. Those Mic 2s.
Yeah, it works. It works great. It records to itself, 32 float. So if you need that as well, I use that for recorded video stuff a lot. Like I used to use a way more expensive mic, the Electrosonic, that recorded to itself. I forget the name of it, but I don't see a huge difference in quality. Again, I'm going to YouTube, and I am not an audio person. I know.
Right. And you're punishing
really
conditions where it's probably
there's always a lot of wind.
Yeah.
I'm always trying to figure out where to put the lav on people to get the best to pick up them. But it's really about it's more about picking up some of the environment people are riding through as well. So,
gotcha.
To help tell the story.
What are you monitoring? Are you just like regular AirPods in ear when you're riding? I
cannot monitor at all. Which is a big pain. So like on live streams, there's a lot of feedback I have moderators that help me, but there's also the chat will immediately say stuff. Immediately.
Right. Yeah.
Hey, the audio sucks. What's going on? Or the bit rate's down or this or that. They'll tell you. So like, you'll get
relentless.
feedback quickly.
Yeah.
And also now that exactly. Now that I switched to Moblin, I can see in real time, like, the amount I'm sending up and what connections are connected, and so I'll know as well, and I can see the audio really levels too.
What about you, Ezra? What's the if you're going to invest in something that your audience you think will make the biggest difference, where do you usually start?
When it comes to a live stream specifically, or just...
like recently you were doing something pretty crazy at NAB, right? Where do you feel like was the most critical piece of kit there to that maybe hindered the quality or made the day with it?
The NAB demo, I helped stand up a proof of concept with Verizon, where we stood up a private 5G network at our booth, and then we had I think it was 16 camera feeds transmitting over 5G, and then we ran some AI inference on those feeds to do basically object detection on horse race. It's pretty, but on like my own projects, I always kind of default back to interactivity or agency. I feel like to me that becomes a premium, like how you engage with your audience. And to me, even if there's drawbacks in picture or sound quality, if you can kind of really pull them in with that agency, whether it's like again, I'm really in the immersive storytelling world where it's like interactive hotspots, or I really still like, head tracking, being able to look around or switch camera angles. I think that always kind of allows you to stay present longer in that experience. To me, that's premium, but maybe that's a niche.
Yeah.
Yeah, Terry, what were you doing before your bike excursions?
I got pushed into the bike excursions,
Yeah.
Through 2020 because there just wasn't a lot of work. I was in video production. I was at a production company, the DP there for a few years, 12 years I was with a warehouse, and then freelance for a while in New York City. And then I decided to not get any work because there was no work. And then I started taking strange jobs with David. I mean, we were already working together for years before that, but he started approaching me with live to tape and live jobs, which I had no real experience in, seeing vMix and that kind of environment, being on live comms, like your camera's always hot and someone's yelling at you to get a 2-shot and follow the action, this and that. So was not used to that environment, and so that's how I kind of got looped into the live stuff. He saw what I was doing on the YouTube and Twitch side, and he was like, "You want to do this? Try this professionally. It's kind of like being a cam op,
Right?
Just a little different."
I have to say though, Terry has now become a pioneer in this area, and it's scary good how good he has got it to go. And when you talk to Terry about what he's engineering and what he's planning to do, and you see the bicycle that essentially is going to carry him and all of this tech, 1,000 miles, and ultimately he's going to run his own TV show. Like when you did the trip down to Florida.
Oh yeah,
that was such compelling viewing, and it was essentially the perfect model that all of those second screen brand managers were trying to essentially push to everyone at a certain point, when television was going to have an iPad and you were going to sit there and follow along with the show and you were going to gamify everything. The only time I've ever seen second screen work really well and consistently is Formula One, where they have this idea of having, the ability to you can watch from the driver's point of view and you can have all the stats running and you can see the screen at the top. And I think that is a good case study, an example of where that capability works in terms of reaching out more technology and understanding a way to immerse people. But we talk about immersion now, and I genuinely think that, Terry, what you've done in regards to, say, some of the examples, like where you've had the Discord channel going on the phone, which is on the bike, and then you've got a camera on the front looking back, you've got a camera on the back looking forward, you've got something else somewhere else looking.
How are you switching, Terry? Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
On that,
he should tell the story. Sorry. Yeah.
On that particular setup, like I said, I'm always trying to see what's new and available. I was using a YOLO box, if you've heard of that. It's like a prosumer kind of streaming device. It's just a monitor that actually takes, it does take a SIM card, it takes Ethernet, it takes a Wi-Fi, and it doesn't bond. So I was only using it as an input for 2 cameras because I was trying to solve a problem for the live view. It only has one HDMI in. So I was trying to get 2 cameras in there. So that's my solution, was to use a YOLO box and then figure out how to power that riding from Washington, D.C. to Florida, Key West, Florida in January.
Is that
I found out all kinds of issues. What's that?
Is that a physical switcher, like switching cam A, cam B?
Yeah. It's a touchscreen switcher. Yeah, it has 2.
Wow.
Actually, they have a pro version that has 4 or 6 inputs in it. On it.
Man, that's slick.
It doesn't bond though. So I did run a version of Speedify backdoored on it, and tried to use that, but it didn't work very well.
I imagine you have a
Speedify's
Black Magic ATEM switcher or whatever just taped to the
I
the
thought about doing that because I do have some Max Oak batteries from the first time I did a live when I rode across country. They're huge, laptop batteries, and they do charge the ATEM. I've used it on a 24-hour fastest known time run for a friend's like a Cervelo. If you know what Cervelo is, it's a road bike company. They rode from Los Angeles to Las Vegas, and they tried to beat the fastest known time. So it was like a 23-hour live stream. So we were running a switcher in there because I had 4 cameras.
Yeah.
Cool. Do you ever overlay like map or geospatial?
Oh, totally.
data?
Yeah.
Really?
So my
Cool.
friend, so I have a friend who built this app called Real Time IRL. It uses cell phone GPS data. So it has location, streets. It has a small map. You can click. There's a clickable link, and it'll open up a whole nother URL, and it'll show where I'm at, but it also show where everyone else in the world who's using the app, which is kind of cool because there's some discovery there. I've actually met people here in New York that they're like, oh, I met you because I was on Real Time IRL, and I saw that you were in New York, and then now I watch your streams, which is pretty strange. But it shows speed, it shows temperature, all the info. That's pretty, like, distance. So yeah,
It's really innovative. Thanks for sharing.
Cool. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
What about you, Nick? If you're starting from scratch today, like what would you do differently? I think, I guess I just want to preface this that there's a lot of people probably in our audience who are podcasters, people that make content that are looking at some of the production scales that we're talking about, and either A, feeling like it's unattainable, or B, that there's no unique space left to carve something out. And I'm kind of curious, like it's really interesting, Terry, to hear that you kind of just jumped into this in 2020, and yeah. So is there anything that you would offer to somebody coming up into this right now who's like, man, I love the idea of making content in the studio. What should they know?
Man, I don't really know what I would necessarily change if I had to go back and do something differently. I think everything that I have done has led me to, obviously, where it sounds super cheesy, but it's led me to where it is now, which I'm pretty stoked on. But ultimately, I think, like, maybe to slightly pivot that answer, I think what I would probably change is I'm an independent contractor. So like I'm my own boss, I'm my own company. So I would probably, in most cases, if I were to go back and do something differently, I would probably try and hone in a little bit more on like how to manage, from the business side of things a little bit better. Because I think I stumbled a lot when I was younger, trying to figure out how to manage all that stuff on my own at a younger age. So if I could go back, I would probably try and maybe take some business classes or figure out something on those lines to try and further understand how taxes work, how write-offs work, all that kind of stuff. I think that's often not talked about, especially if there's people who, work in a company to where they're kind of an employee as an independent contractor. There's not really that avenue for me. It's kind of just you get asked to make the content, and then like you kind of figure out how to get paid later on, and all the other stuff later on. And I think for a younger audience, I think honing in on that stuff, especially if you're not part of a company as an employee, I think is pretty important. I know that that's kind of outside of this conversation in general. I think that's a recurring theme that I think a lot of really successful people have kind of been sharing with us, is that there's a lot of like putting yourself out there and jumping in, when you're afraid, push harder on that thing, and also look at all the stuff that's maybe not so glamorous and the elements of it. Understanding how the taxes work might be a key to you being sustainable. Yes.
And doing this for a while. So
absolutely.
Yeah.
And I think too, like, there's a lot of people in my industry in the audio. I started as a mixing engineer. I started as like a record producer, started working in the audio industry. I didn't necessarily move to, I was kind of not forced, but I just kind of pivoted into video organically through the situation that I was in. But I would say, like, I probably would have, if we're talking about what I would have done differently earlier, I probably would have, in my position where I was working in a studio, I probably would have likely offered video services, even if they were not super S tier content. I would have probably tried to offer video services to people that were focusing on primarily audio with me, because I feel like, especially with the big boom of social media and TikTok and all that stuff, I think video is king way more over audio. And I think that a lot of bands and a lot of artists would benefit from, hey, we're in the studio, it's awesome that the producer just has a GoPro up in the room and is filming behind the scenes of us working on this song or whatever that we could post later on, instead of, and that's another service that you can offer to your client as, hey, look, we're making the song, but also, I can help whip up some behind the scenes footage for you guys and help make some TikTok content for you, or whatever the content might be, in order to help promote. Because again, I think that's where all promotion is really led to. I mean, you can make a song all day long, but if you don't have any traction to kind of push that through on these social media platforms, that you're kind of just making the song for your mom. which is what
it's kind of, I just want to throw one thing on top of that, because often we do hear about that, like video's king, but knowing that we've got a lot of people in here that they probably, I bet you would all agree that actually story is probably the king of all of it, and it sounds like even within something like making a record now, that the story about the band and the story of that whole process can somehow now be more important than the actual recorded work that you're putting out there. It's the story of that artist's career, the story of their fan engagement, all this stuff.
Well, back in the day, it was like the DVD of the making of, which was like, oh my gosh, I get to watch a little insight on how this band makes its content. And now, I could just turn on my phone and look at what Blink-182 is doing in their rehearsal space, or what Metallica did, or whatever. You know what I mean? It's just there for you now. And if you're not adding to that, you're falling behind, I guess.
Mm-hmm. How about you, Dave, Ezra? You guys got any thoughts to share for the up and comers?
I'll take this very briefly, Ezra. I didn't start where I start now. Ironically, I started in streaming as developing streaming technology. Before I kind of found my kind of like favored place, which is what I do now, and I enjoy it. And one of the things that's kept me going in doing this, because Moonshine, which is my company, Sandblast, my partners here that I have a studio based out of. This is 10 years this year of our company, and ultimately that's 10 years of me doing, to Nick's point, the experience that essentially means that I get to do what I enjoy doing. I get to be my own boss. I get to, be someone who can choose my hours, set things the way I want to set them. It's not for everyone. I think a lot of people want the level of reliability and stability, so to speak, in terms of what the costs are, because you've always got to bounce around. But I think what has always led and benefited me personally is the ability to pivot to anything, really. I think it's always about not saying no. I think it's about saying yes. And if you have a clear idea of most of it, you can figure the rest out. And ultimately, it leads you to work with people like we were on the call today, and that's how we've kind of all met. It's like there's opportunities which come up where, it might be something that I don't understand about audio, but I know a guy I can call about it. If I end up in a situation where I need to figure something out, I can figure it out because of my network. And that, again, has kind of led me to a level of satisfaction that has kept me going. And it continues to give. It's continuously been, and particularly because we're in a creative industry, there's obviously jobs that are a little bit more mundane, a little bit more run-of-the-mill. But then there's also stuff that, you get involved in that may not necessarily have the budget attached to them, but they are so gratifying and experience driven that they give you something more that you can lead to something else beyond that. And I think, to your question, the tools that we have now, the resources that we have now are constantly getting better. So I think you can start with a foundation in certain things, but it's always what your core skill set is in. So if it's video, it's video. If it's streaming, it's streaming. If it's audio, it's audio. Those foundation elements will serve you well across the board, but ultimately you scale as you start to learn and understand new things, and it gets more and more interesting. It's more exciting. Sorry, Ezra, go. You.
No, I like that. It really resonates with me, both what you and Nick shared, David. For me, as an engineer, I'm always kind of got this internal struggle to specialize versus be a generalize with my skill set, right? And, I always kind of take the lead on certain projects where I want that 500-foot view of the entire pipeline versus just being like, accountable for just one hop or one piece, right? I feel like that's a nice niche that I've kind of carved out for myself, and I'm a big proponent of documentation. So I kind of live and die by my signal flow diagrams at the end of the day, right? And working remotely, that's been key. But if I could change something, going back in my career, and maybe like kind of taking more of a risk on myself or betting on myself and not being such a company man, wanting to work for these big corporations. I'm kind of envious of your guys' kind of, career history where, working for yourself and having the capability of pivoting on a moment, where I was tied to these big corporations, these big corporate initiatives, even though I got a lot of skills by learning on the job. That's one thing I'm really excited about being in Hawaii now and starting my own consultancy and being able to kind of be more choosy about my jobs. And now I can be, also a full-time parent at the same time, right? And kind of really choose what, is valuable at this point in my career.
Amazing. Well, I'm gonna flip it to the other side of it now. What's the harsh reality check? What's one uncomfortable truth about remote production that new producers aren't ready for?
Whilst you think on that, I'm just going to go back on Wi-Fi and try and reposition myself.
Yeah, are you going to go sit in your tech demo green screen?
Hell yeah.
It could all go horribly wrong, but I think I may have practiced whilst we've been talking. So stand by.
Yeah. Sounds good.
Russ, I think we touched on it earlier. It's as much as you can plan and prepare, you just can't. It just seems like there still isn't a full reliable option when it comes to being on the internet. Like there's connection
Sometimes
issues.
the internet goes out.
Yeah, there's just and you have to figure out what to do in that situation. So I guess that means record to camera and just be okay with it. And I think it's about being crystal clear with the client and letting them know that that's not going to happen, but it might. And we have to have a plan for that. So,
yeah, and not setting expectations can really probably lead to some wild disappointments. So
exactly.
In 5 years, the biggest changes in how we collaborate and produce content remotely. Anyone willing to take a stab at a guess of what Dave's doing down there right now? Is that what things are going to look like in 5 years?
We're going to join Dave at the tech demo from
all be telepathic.
Yeah.
I mean, the big elephant in the room is AI, right? And how it affects all of our jobs and the whole labor industry as a whole. But things like variable bit rate and collaboration. I feel like AI is going to have a big part in it. Hopefully, in 5 years, we can I don't know. I just saw some note about China releasing a 10G spectrum, right, to basically support their army and robotic soldier initiative. So I mean, it's a big race for bandwidth. I don't know what 5 years holds as far as our exposure to all these wavelengths, and either from a health perspective either. But I think. I like what you said, Terry, earlier. It's like whatever new product, whatever new demo you can get your hands on to be viable, to understand capabilities. I think that's important. So when you do see the writing on the wall or that next wave coming, you're ready for it.
Dave, we got audio from you?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Looking good.
Weather looks beautiful over there, dude.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Reporting in from the field.
I appreciate that. So I think I'd like to answer that question, I guess in the way that, in terms of what I see now and where I feel particularly our industry is going. The idea of where potentially everything is in 5 years' time, I think AI plays an enormous part of that, obviously. Where, how, I think that's still to be decided. I think that's still an industry that's finding its feet. Tools that are part of that pipeline are, as you can tell, particularly in audio and video, they're showing themselves to be, incredibly very useful in regards to how we kind of utilize them in, whether it's an editing post-production process, whether it's in VFX,
everything that kind of streamlines and improves a process or a step that helps us improve our workflow or speed our workflow up, I feel is a beneficial use of the technology. Where it goes beyond that, I don't know. But I feel, as I saw at NAB, the kind of approach back into immersive, where, you know, I guess pioneered and heralded by Meta with what they did. You know, the fact that the number of units sold of like the MetaQuest headsets in the first, second, and third iteration, where that's slowly taking us, the content creation side of that, and where that's going. I feel that technology is going to get thinner, it's going to get smaller, it's going to get more comfortable, it's going to get better, if obviously there's a market for it and if there's an appetite for it. But I mean, it starts to bring us back into AR, it starts to bring us into the sort of like the opposite, well, the other side of the curve. After VR had its moment, AR was predicted to be the next thing, but obviously technology is not necessarily there for that. So hardware is required. I think it's a necessary step. And I think, you know, where we see our world now, it's something that, you know, makes sense that it could potentially happen as, you know, that type of hardware development continues. You know, things that, like wearing glasses, anything that kind of improves upon display technology that we start to see evolve, which will be benefited by AI agents, which essentially will be there to support and offer new opportunities within that developing world, but depending upon what that, you know, really looks like. Yeah, it's unknown, it's uncertain, but I think it's positive, and I think there's a lot of things out there that will slowly come to the fore, but I definitely think immersive is going to be one of them. I think AI is obviously going to continue developing, and I'll be intrigued and excited to see where that leads.
This is, I guess I'll lob this towards Terry and Nick. What do you think about, well, let me just preface this. I feel like I've been thinking about this a lot lately, and like looking at like podcasting, social media, YouTube, platforms like Discord, Twitch. Do you feel like these things have reached their maturity? I'll back this up even further and think like, okay, like radio, when that first came out, people were like, they probably had the idea that this thing is going to just be all of these things down in the future. It's going to be crazy what radio is. It's going to be, you know, and they played with it. They made like War of the Worlds and made hour-long stories on it. And then it just kind of rested down into a very formatted medium where it's like, here's some songs, and then a DJ comes in, and then some songs again, and commercials and all this stuff. And I'm kind of curious if you feel like we've hit this level of maturity with the places that you guys are finding your audience right now. Any thoughts on any of that?
I think they're still trying to figure it out. I mean, I think they're just in a stage right now where they can't find any new developments, and they seem to just be copying each other. Mm-hmm. For example, you know, TikTok brought vertical video, which I hate, but now I have to do. And Instagram followed, and now YouTube is following really hard. And if you're not doing vertical on YouTube, you're pretty much not getting discovered very easily. And
I could not agree more.
I think there's still room for growth. I don't know what that is. Maybe it's you know, using some of the cameras that Dave was just mentioning for the Oculus, but not quite, you know, maybe it's a different experience, but I think, I don't know what else there is for just a flat screen, honestly.
Right.
They just seem that someone stumbles or finds something that works for mobile, and then it just kind of, everyone just copies, and then and then it's like it's like you're making content for three of the same platforms. Even, you know, YouTube is going after Twitch slowly, you know, and those are all copy each other. So like the same reward systems built into watching live streams vertically on YouTube. YouTube is stealing the ideas that TikTok came up with, and just for engagement. And it just seems like this, I don't know. Mm-hmm. It's like when you just say content or social, it feels that way now. Cause that just means YouTube, TikTok, and Instagram, because you can make pretty much the same content, with the exception of YouTube still holds down the 16:9 longer form video. I don't think there's any other place for that, and I think they are locked in. But
Do
like
either
a
of you-
three, like, oh, go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, do either of you feel like beholden to any one of these platforms at this point, or do you feel like it's very important to kind of center your content and your brand in an agnostic way so that you can? We got Burt Reynolds in the call now with Ezra. Nice.
Yeah, dude.
I have some. I mean, Nick, you want to say? I have something to say, but I feel like, go ahead.
Oh no, I think
Put you on the spot.
Gosh, that was hilarious. The Burt Reynolds. I think if the short answer to that question, I think, is if you are already posting a short on YouTube, why not just post it on Instagram as well? I think is kind of the thought process in this case. Just because I feel like if you don't, at that point, it's just a missed market potentially. That's already there. That already is going to. Like Terry said, they're already all requiring the same format of video. They're already all requiring the same 60-second, in most cases. I mean, maybe that's changed at this point, but like, there's all everyone kind of has these. Okay, yeah, they all have these same restrictions that like ultimately it's like, well, if I'm already posting here, why not post there as well? But I think on the smaller scale of things, we're talking like global here, global reach on all these different platforms. But like you brought up a comment like Discord. I think Discord is, personally, I think that's just scratching the surface, and eventually, I think will overtake something like a Facebook group or like a different, a different way of some sort of forum. Especially too, because like even in 2020 or even before 2020, before COVID, I'm not sure if any like for my industry, it was always like, let's say I'm struggling with something on a mix, and I want to just ask my friend about it. I could go the convoluted way of like trying to figure out how to screen record it and send it to him, or I could try and screen share on a platform like Discord or whatever. I don't know how. Back then, it was so hard to get system audio into an application to be able to share, and maybe it could work, but it was mono, or it was 64 kbps, which is just like it's just destroying your quality. At this point now, Discord is so intuitive to where I can just hit start streaming. It's already capturing my system audio, and I can just go, hey, I have this problem with this mix. What do you guys think? How, help me out here, whatever. And now they're doing this thing too with like, Terry, I'm not sure if you're familiar with it. Maybe you are or not in Discord, like if you have a community or not, but like stages, the ability to like go on this stage and to have an audience there. But now they used to just be like a one-to-one conversation.
Yeah.
I don't even think you could use camera. Now they've updated it to where you can have camera, you can share your screen as well. So it's just another avenue of like, it's not even having to go live on one of these core platforms, but instead you could go, hey, I'm going to go live in Discord. If you guys want to come hang out and you have any questions, raise your hand in the Discord chat. I'll bring you up onto the stage. You can ask me those questions. And at the same time, I'm just sitting there editing vocals live to show you my process on how I edit vocals or how I do yada, yada, yada. I think at that
You're
point,
hitting
it was
a more targeted user on on Discord than just hitting YouTube, because you get the random people that come in from discoverability. Discord is like, you're there for a reason, so
you're there
the right
exactly
people.
Yeah,
it's like bringing cinematic experiences into real time, because we've had a taste of what really, really high value content looks like throughout the 90s 2000s, kind of really hitting digital peak maturity of 4K lossless stuff, and then now we move deeper into the internet and we're getting used to lossy as becoming normal, or these like chat platforms that are almost like rudimentary level tech, and now that seems like the high level tech is moving in, and where things like Dave's tech demo here on the bottom is going to become possibly the norm for something like a Discord stage in that environment. So that's I think that's probably an interesting lens on where we are going
battle
in short order.
The codecs are coming
sure.
too.
It's
the whole conversation about visually lossless versus truly lossless, right? And I always find that intriguing. It's like it depends if you're working in large format, like working for IMAX. Something like visually lossless isn't so lossless when you're looking at a 65-foot screen, right?
Right.
But if you're streaming it on the internet, maybe you can get away with some of those affordances. I
got to tie this back to Source Elements, because I'm really proud of these things. So like just talking about Nexus for a second, like Nexus was that sort of routing solution that people were using, and but in the heat of the pandemic, I need to get out of here and get over there. I'm doing this complex stream. Source Connect, looking at restore and replace, which I think the feature is incredible, and we've kind of touched on it in this call, like the packet loss and how that manifests, and degradation of things through lossy. So we've tried to always approach it where we know people are live. They know they need to be live. They really want things to be happening instantaneously, and with that is the trade-off of quality. But then all of us people that are trying to produce really elevated content, really at the end of the day, when I hit end on this, I'm hoping that I get really high quality cameras out of this and really high quality audio. So that's kind of like the fundamentals of where we're at. And I think, with Source Connect, the idea being you have this really high quality live codec, and that anything that gets lost in the internet is not lost. It's really there. It's ready on both sides, so that in my production timeline, give it 10 minutes after a call or something like that, and it's all in my bin. But I would just want to thank you all so much for joining and meandering down this weird rabbit hole of often we're all behind the scenes, right? So it's really nice to bring it to the front and be able to explore some of the.
I'm excited to follow Terry and Nick on their adventures, and feel free to reach out to me directly.
I'll link everybody in the description.